Welcome back to Simply Holistic. Dr. Tony here. Okay, today I'm not talking about subjects that I have been talking about. Today I'm going to go over this is kind of a short one. It's called The Role of Sex Steroid Hormones in Pelvic Organ Prolapse. So this is not going to be a common I want to say popular. It's not going to be a popular subject. This is not going to be a common subject because really popular is not the right word. This is not going to be a common subject, meaning that most of you, I can't say won't, most of you should not have this to deal with. Should not. But some of you will. Well, some of you do. So, some of you do, and or will have this issue to battle. So with that said, let me read this headline again. Role of sex steroid hormones. The role of these hormones, your sex hormones, in pelvic organ prolapse. So, what does prolapse mean? And it's a pelvic organ. We're really talking about the uterus, by the way. Let me clarify that. So, the role of your sex hormones, which are steroid hormones, but your sex hormones in pelvic organs, so in uterus, how your sex organs affect your uterus, or this specific way that your sex organs affect your uterus, the prolapse. That means that the uterus is going to sound nasty. Might even sound unbelievable, but it happens. Your uterus is actually literally falling out of through your vaginal canal. Yeah, this may help. Hold on. I'll use the healthy model because this may actually help. The role of your sex hormones in uterine prolapse, which means this part of this whole apparatus, your uterus, this part, this is the bottom of your uterus. The top of your vaginal canal, the bottom of your uterus. What this means is that your uterus is actually falling I'm out of the camera again. Falling down through your vaginal canal. Does this seem far-fetched? Does this seem unrealistic or unbelievable? Honestly, this should seem far-fetched, unrealistic, and unbelievable. It should be far-fetched, unrealistic, and unbelievable. It should be that way. It should be. Your uterus actually somehow falling down, falling through your vaginal canal. And believe it or not, this uterus right here, believe it or not, this entire uterus can come all the way down your vaginal canal and out of your vagina, out of your body. Seriously, this uterus can literally slide all the way down and actually come out of your body. Do you want that to happen? I don't want to see it happen. This is why I said this should not be a common battle for most of you. Should not be. But the reality is, some of you either have, are, or will be fighting this. So we're going to talk about it. All right, so back to the headline here. Role of sex steroid hormones in pelvic organ prolapse. The prolapse is where the uterus is actually falling out of the vaginal canal. Okay, abstract. This is all we're actually discussing on this here is just the whole abstract. The objective, methods, results, conclusions. POP, which is pelvic organ prolapse, affects a significant percentage of women. They don't define what significant percentage is. Affects a significant percentage of women and contributes to major healthcare costs, both in the United States and worldwide. This review examines the current understanding of the role of sex steroid hormones, which are estrogens, androgens, and progesterone. Androgens, by the way, includes testosterone. In POP, or pelvic organ prolapse, in premenopausal, perimenopausal, and postmenopausal women. So in other words, your adult life, childbearing years up. Methods. We reviewed the relevant studies on POP related to estrogens, androgens, and progesterone in both animal models and humans. Results. Estrogen has a profound influence on the synthesis and metabolism of pelvic connective tissues and may have the ability to prevent POP and improve prognosis if used therapeutically. There's limited research regarding the role of androgens and progesterone and their receptors in POP, and results so far have been contradictory. Depends on who's looking and what they're looking for. Warranting further study to determine whether changes in androgen and progesterone receptor expression are a cause or an effect of POP. Okay, so let me read that part. Estrogen has a profound influence. You need estrogen in your body. There are those of you where the estrogen is pretty well non-existent. Some of you have cases like that where your estrogen is, for all intents and purposes, gone. I mean, a trace of it will show up on a lab test, but for all intents and purposes, it's gone. Estrogen is needed. Estrogen has a profound influence on the synthesis and metabolism of pelvic connective tissues. So we've talked about metabolism, where every cell in your body contributes to your metabolism because it's the power plant within each cell that is what gives you your metabolism. Estrogen has a profound influence on the synthesis and metabolism of pelvic connective tissues. Pelvic connective tissues. This has to sit inside that pelvic cavity. Should have brought this over. Oops, arm flopped. Okay. This has to sit inside this pelvic cavity. It doesn't sit there free floating. It does not sit there free floating like I have it here. Our body requires connective tissue to hold this together. It's got to stay in place. This actually comes down through here. This, right about there, has to stay in place. The connective tissue is all around it, Okay, we say connective tissue, ligaments, joints. On your joints, ligaments, on your joints. You have connective tissue here on your wrist. You have connective tissue here on your elbow. Your joints have connective tissue that helps to hold the joint together while it's going through its range of motion. Well, this is not going through a range of motion. If you have a tilted uterus, it's just tilted. It's not moving steadily. It's not going through a range of motion. This is not going through a range of motion, but the connective tissue is holding it in place, because guess what? If the connective tissue wasn't there, then it would be. It would be bouncing up and down all around inside your pelvic cavity. So the connective tissue has to stay in place. It has to be there to hold this still. So I'm explaining that to go back to this sentence. Estrogen has a profound influence on the synthesis and metabolism of pelvic connective tissues. The synthesis, making your tissue. Your ovaries helping to produce estrogen, okay? Your ovaries here are helping to produce your estrogen. That same estrogen is helping to construct the tissue, the ligaments that's holding it in place. Your ovaries making estrogen, the same estrogen making tissue, ligaments that holds this apparatus in place within your pelvic cavity. Therefore, the estrogen that this is making is important. Very, very important. Okay, an estrogen may have the ability to help prevent pelvic organ prolapse and improve prognosis if used therapeutically. Okay, so going back to this, the uterus falling down out the vaginal canal, that's the prolapse. So the estrogen that the ovaries are producing is building the connective tissue, the ligaments, to hold this in place within your pelvic cavity. The same estrogen is working on the connective tissue inside here. Inside your uterus, there's also connective tissue to hold that in place. So the same estrogen is building the connective tissue to actually literally hold your uterus where it should be. So if that connective tissue, those ligaments, are not being made, prolapse. The uterus slides right out. So these need to be healthy. Your ovaries need to be healthy to produce the estrogen, to hold this in place within your pelvic cavity, to also hold your uterus in place so it does not literally slide out of your body. So, if your blood tests show that you're not making estrogen, there's a few areas that could be damaged because your body's not making it. Okay, improved prognosis if used therapeutically. There's limited research. We need to have more research. Okay, conclusions. Because of the role that estrogen plays in maintaining the integrity of pelvic floor connective tissues, because of the role that estrogen plays in maintaining the integrity, I want to say the solidness, but the surety of the structure, the integrity of pelvic floor connective tissues. This, all the bottom of your pelvic, all this here is your pelvic floor. All of this here, the bottom of your pelvic bone, the muscle tissue that goes in here is your pelvic floor. Your vagina comes out through your pelvic floor, through it. Muscle tissues here. Connective tissue in here. Estrogen plays a role in maintaining the integrity of this pelvic floor. Maintaining the integrity of the pelvic floor connective tissues, we propose that rigorous and well-controlled studies are needed on the role of exogenous outside estrogen administration as a form of POP prevention. So, of course, this is a pharmaceutical study written to ask for more pharmaceutical help to produce more pharmaceutical interventions. That is their whole purpose, is so that they can produce more pharmaceutical medicines. So, hang on. I'm going to grab something else. Okay. Should have grabbed this again to begin with, but put this picture together here. Sorry, webs. Been a while since I used this model. A couple webs on it. All right. Your pelvic cavity on your skeleton. The pelvic cavity on your skeleton. This is your pelvic floor. All of this actually composes the pelvic floor. Your reproductive system is coming down. See, on this here, on this skeleton, well, you can barely see that. Underneath, see barely where my finger is, my hand is. There we go. Okay. Underneath, this is part of your pelvic floor. Pelvic floor. Vaginal canal is coming out through your pelvic floor. This system here. Coming out through the pelvic floor, on your skeleton, on your body. So this whole thing is the pelvic floor. Within this, inside this, there are connective tissues. And you see we have your bladder. We have the reproductive system. We have the colon back there as well. All of this that's stuffed inside your pelvic cavity. All of this has to have connective tissue holding it in place. This muscular tissue down here is not all there is. You don't have, okay. You see on the camera bones and muscle. Let me bring this closer. You see bones and muscle. The bones by themselves are not going to connect to the muscle. It just ain't happening. Therefore, the bones and the muscle are connected together by ligaments or tendons. Connective tissue is what that is, connective tissue. The bones and the muscle are held together by connective tissue. This is your pelvic floor. This is what you see from the front. You know, the skin was gone. So, the ovaries are producing the majority, should be producing the majority of your estrogen. Sorry, I was distracted a little bit. Your ovaries should be producing the majority of your estrogen. If they are not, for some reason, if your ovaries are not functioning, if you don't have them in your body, by the way, you still have estrogen even if the ovaries are gone. By the way, if your estrogen is not being produced in a good enough supply, and the blood tests show that there's just a trace of it there, the connective tissue of your uterus holding this in place is going to break down. Then the uterus slides out of your body. We don't want that. And beyond that, all this here suffers too because it's all held together, held in place by connective tissue. Really, it's the same connective tissue because it's the same basic tissue type inside your body, so therefore it's the same connective tissue. It's just in a in a different spot, holding something different tissues together. Your pelvic floor is held in place by this connective tissue. Your reproductive system, bladder, colon, all held together by the connective tissue. Your uterus, held in place by the same connective tissue. It's just it's the same tissue in a different spot in your body. So again, if your estrogen is too low, and it does happen, okay, so for the most part, most of you are probably going to be in estrogen dominance, which is a whole other issue. I've made videos on that. Go check them out. For the most part, most of you, and this is why I said in the beginning of this video, this should not be something that's common that most of you are fighting, but it is out there, so I wanted to make this video to bring attention to it. Most of you are living in estrogen dominance. With that said, even in estrogen dominance, you could be in estrogen dominance. You could be in estrogen dominance because your progesterone is flatlined. Your body's not making much estrogen. It's making enough for you to be in estrogen dominance, but it's actually not making enough still to hold the rest of the connective tissues together. So you could be in estrogen dominance and still have your uterus falling out of your body, which sounds contradictory, but it's possible. So this video is about your uterus falling out of your body and the fact that we don't want your uterus to fall out of your body. Okay, well, I hope you don't want your uterus falling out of your body. I can hear some ladies now. I'm not going to use it anymore. I don't need it anymore. I don't care. It can come out. It can go. And I get it. I fully understand your perspective. I ain't going to argue with you and say it needs to stay in. I ain't going to do it. Because I fully understand your perspective. I do. So for me, it's not the fact of keeping your uterus in your body. That's not actually the most important point for me as a healthcare provider, as hopefully soon to be your healthcare provider. That is not even the most important aspect of this for me. This is going to sound crazy, but hear me out. For me, if you are suffering from or dealing with uterine prolapse, if your uterus is falling out of your body, for me, that is a symptom. That's not the main show. It's a symptom. What? My uterus is falling. That should be the main show. I get that perspective. I get it. But for me, okay, I will form a plan to treat that, though. Mark my words on that. I'll form a plan to treat the uterus as it's falling out in order to try to reverse that. I will do that because I want you to keep your uterus in. That's what you want. But the bigger picture for me is that is a symptom. I know it sounds bad and it sounds cold, like I'm cold-hearted, a cold-hearted doc. I get that too. It sounds like I'm just cold-hearted. I get it. But if we find out that your uterus is literally sliding out of your vagina, that's not the main show for me. It's a symptom. Which tells me that your estrogen is not where it needs to be. Which then tells me that the bigger picture is this is not just affecting your uterus. It is affecting your entire pelvic cavity, the entire thing. If your uterus is sliding out, we actually have bigger problems. I have to address the estrogen level because I have to address everything going on within your pelvic cavity. Not just the uterus, that's one part of it. I don't want I don't I don't want your whole pelvic floor to fall apart. Yeah, you heard that right. I don't want your whole pelvic floor to fall apart. All this here, the muscle, bone, connective tissue, held together by connective tissue. I don't want this whole apparatus to fall apart. If your body is that low in estrogen, you're going to be suffering down here. Not just the uterus itself falling out, but you're going to be suffering down here. You're going to have other issues. Weak bones, no connective tissue holding stuff together. Weak muscles, because if you have weak bones, you're going to have weak muscles. It's going to go hand in hand. This entire structure is going to get weak. Your hip joints are connected to this also. So your hip movement, your legs, your walking, your jogging, your running, all that is going to be connected to this here. So if you're low on estrogen, it does not just affect the uterus. It doesn't stop there. The uterus is the sign of how bad it is. But then we need to address the entire big picture, which then leads to the overall health of your body. Because if all this is falling apart, your heart's going to be falling apart too. Yes, I just connected your pelvic region to your heart. Yes, I did. Correctly so. If your pelvic floor is falling apart, your heart's going to be falling apart. Every area of your body is going to start falling apart. Yes, because your pelvic region is collapsing. You know, most pharmaceutical doctors today want to go in and destroy your pelvic region. Whole other subject, whole other video, whole other soapbox. But I know the pharmaceutical doctors want to ideally destroy your pelvic region. I don't encourage it. I don't support it. I'm not a fan of it. I hope that you come this direction instead of that direction. I really, really do. With all this said, find me at justsimplyholistic.com. Get yourself into our Simply Holistic office, especially the location we are getting ready to move to open up in, moving into. Bring your intake forms in. Let's review them. Go through our gamut of testing. Let's see where you are with your hormones. Let's see where your estrogen is. Let's see if you're dealing with this loss of the uterus. Let's see if you're about to deal with the loss of the uterus, or if you have. Let's help you turn your health around. We can, and we will. We look forward to seeing and serving you soon.